Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Canto 9, Chapter 10, entitled The Pastimes of Lord Ramchandra, text 29. Shri Shuka Uvacha Svanam Vibhashanaschakre Kosalandranumodita Pitrimeda Vidana Nena Yad Uktam Samparayikam. Translation. Sri Shukadev Goswami said, Vibhishana, the pious brother of Ravana and devotee of Lord Ramchandra, received approval from Lord Ramchandra, the king of Kosala. Then he performed the prescribed funeral ceremonies for his family members to save them from the path to hell. Purport. After giving up the body, one is transferred to another body, but sometimes if one is too sinful, he is checked from transmigrating to another body, and thus he becomes a ghost. To save a diseased person from ghostly life, the funeral ceremony, or Shraddha ceremony, is prescribed in authorized Shastra. As described in authorized Shastra, must be performed. Ravana was killed by Lord Ramchandra and was destined for hellish life, but by Lord Ramchandra's advice, Vibhishana, Ravana's brother, performed all the duties prescribed in relation to the dead. Thus Lord Ramchandra was kind to Ravana even after Ravana's death. Om Agyantimarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Patakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatan Sahagana Raganatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinobandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanjana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Suti Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhaivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadada Shivasade Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So beg for the blessings of the assembled devotees. Adi Purush Prabhu asks for your blessings. We can say something for the pleasure of Shishi Radha Mulidar. May it be in line with Guru Parampara and benefit the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. So reading Canto 9, Chapter 10, which is entitled The Pastimes of Lord Ramchandra, text 29. I'll read it again. Sri Shukadev Goswami said, Vibhishana, the pious brother of Ravana and devotee of Lord Ramchandra, received approval from Lord Ramchandra, the king of Kosala. Then he performed the prescribed funeral ceremonies for his family members to save them from the path to hell. So we're hearing the pastimes in brief of Lord Ramchandra, which are more elaborately described in the Ramayana, of course. But Srimad Bhagavatam here is giving a summary of some of these pastimes. And this is our path of yoga, just turning our attention back to the Lord by hearing about the Lord, Harikatha, hearing his activities, his glories. We're offering our consciousness back to the Lord. Our consciousness is meant to be engaged in the service of the Lord, just as our mind, our senses, everything is meant for the Lord's pleasure. So when we hear, we can keep that in mind. And this is actually what we're doing. This is our yoga, our process of yoga, is that the consciousness is being returned back at the lotus feet of the Lord by hearing his wonderful pastimes. So Lord Ram just released an arrow that went straight into the heart of Ravana. And it's described a few verses back that Ravana fell from the sky just as a pious man, after having gone to the heavens, again falls back down to the earth. And this is actually related to our verse today, this description, because we're going to talk a little bit about what happens after we die. I also wanted to say something about Lord Ramchandra's kindness. How do we deal with evil in this world or injustice? We can learn that lesson from Lord Ramchandra in this pastime. So I wanted to say something about when we die, because what's mentioned here a little bit is these funeral rites, the Shraddha ceremony, protecting Ravana from going to hell. So just to get some understanding of what's actually happening here. It said that when we die, well, the soul is situated in the heart. And the soul is there floating on the life airs. And when we come to the point of death, the soul actually leaves out from the heart. And there are different ways the soul leaves from out of the heart. There are different pathways. These are called nadis. Nadis are like subtle channels that are coming out from the heart and going in different directions, like pathways. It's said, the different numbers given, sometimes it said there are 101 nadis that come out from the heart. Sometimes it says there are many more, much more than that, 101,000, some people say, 72,000, whatever it may be. In the heart, there are channels that go out. It's like if you have been to New York, most of you maybe are in New York, but if you look at a New York subway map, what's the heart of New York City? You could probably say around 34th Street, 42nd Street. If you look at a subway map, you'll see all these subways are leaving from that area and going in different directions of Manhattan or out of Manhattan as well. Right? So looking at that subway map, we get an idea. The heart is the center. The soul is in the center of the heart, and all these pathways are going in different directions. And when a person dies, there's one pathway. It's called the Shushumna Nadi, and it goes upward out through the head. And if one takes that path, if one goes that path, when they leave out of their body, it's said that they go to immortality, they attain immortality. They're liberated. So if there's 101 nadis, one leads to liberation. The other 100 lead to a variety of different temporary destinations. Right? So there are so many possibilities actually. And this one that leaves out from the top of the head, I'm just remembering that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he wrote a little bit about his life, like something like a diary. And he shares there that when his grandfather was passing away, he was called by his grandfather at that time. And so Bhaktivinoda Thakur, as a boy, went to see his grandfather. And his grandfather made some predictions also that Bhaktivinoda Thakur would become a great Vaishnava. And soon after that, he gave up his body. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur was there, and he writes about this, that he saw how his father left out from the top of his head. He was kind of like a devotee mystic, Bhaktivinoda Thakur's grandfather. And he sat in meditation before he was planning to leave his body. And he left from the top of his head. Actually, sometimes there's even a burst. There's a little point where one leaves and there's some blood that's left on the head. So this is called the Shushumna Nadi, and it leads to liberation when one leaves in that way. And the other nadis, the other pathways, subways, channels, they bring one to different destinations that are temporary. And it's described, interestingly, in the Vedanta Sutra that how do we know which one to take? So you're the soul, you're in your own heart, actually, you just died. And there are all these different directions. Imagine it from the vision of the soul. One of them lights up, and that's how you know which one to take. So we hear sometimes when people die, they talk about light, that they see a tunnel and they go in that direction. This is actually confirmed in Vedanta Sutra, that one of the channels, one of these pathways will be lit up. And naturally, imagine you're in a complete darkness and it's frightening, right? But one path lights up, naturally you'll take it and you'll go in that direction. So the soul moves towards that particular pathway, which is lit up, and follows it and goes. So what determines, which pathway lights up? The super soul. It said the super soul lights up that path. And of course, this is according to what our karma is. So it's not just some random thing, maybe this channel, that channel, but it's your karma unfolding. And there's this description that's given, and this is kind of how one knows which path to take. One of those paths will be lit up and the soul goes through it. And then one is sometimes met by a guide, right? Like I was talking about the path out through the head. It's also called the Devayana path. And it's called the Devayana path. This is in the 8th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. This 2 paths are mentioned there. Pitrayana and Devayana. So the path of liberation is the Devayana path. Why? Because through that path upward towards liberation, one is going through different realms, and there are different demigods that actually escort you. So the Devayana, the Devas actually take you from one place to the next, kind of they hand you off to each other as you go up. So Ativahika Deva, it's called. These kind of guides that are there. I always found this so interesting that this is information in the Upanishads and the Vedanta Sutra, because we hear people when they give stories of near death. I was met by this person, family members. Family members can also be a guide. But we'll see what's described here. And then there are devas that are also that can be guides and take you further on this path. So anyway, so we follow this particular path out from the body. And then if one doesn't take that Shushumna Nadi to liberation, one is not going to be liberated, right? Then what happens? Then it's said that one is in another state for some time. State of consciousness also means place, a particular place. There's a place and there's a state of consciousness, and they're one. So one is in a particular state which is called Antariksha, which means an in-between state. Antariksha means in between. And where are you then? What's happening? What is that state? It's described that that's a place where one is on their way to see Yamaraj, because Yamaraj will determine where you're going. We know Yamaraj, he's also looking at the karmic activities, and he's giving a perfect justice. One may go to the heavens. One may go to the hells according to their activities, their thoughts, their feelings throughout life. All of that creates a particular destination because we're creating a certain consciousness. And that consciousness has to be in an environment that is in harmony with the consciousness. So there's a particular in-between place before one gets to Yamaraj. And it's said that this is when the soul is in this particular place, then that person is termed a preta, which means a ghost. One is a ghost at that time. And one is on their way to Yamaraj, and apparently there's a lot of difficulty on that journey. And so there's this ceremony in the Vedic culture, which is called the Shraddha ceremony, which your family who is still living, they may make particular offerings and chant mantras with qualified brahmanas, and it reduces some of the suffering in this state as while one is a ghost. And it also may take away their if that person is now going to Yamaraj and they're going to be going to hell because of their activities, that can also prevent these particular offerings and these ceremonies and these mantras. Or at least it may reduce the suffering of that particular soul. And so there's a tradition in the Vedic culture of these offerings being made. Very interesting that what is the word in Sanskrit for son? Putra. Putra means son. But this word actually comes from, it's connected to this funeral ceremony because pu means it's referring to a place, Pundama, which is a hellish place. And tra, just like we have mantra, and that means tra comes from trayate, to deliver. So putra means the son is meant to deliver the parents from having to go to hell, if that is in their karma. So the very name for son in Sanskrit, putra, it's connected to this ceremony that the son should perform the last rites. There are certain offerings to be made after the dying of the family member. And the very name given to a son is meant, this is the duty of a son, to deliver one's parents from hell. So by the son making particular offerings, this is also very universal. All different parts of the world, this ancestor worshiping when a family member dies, certain offerings that are made, certain ceremonies that are performed. It's like feeding the ancestors, right? There was I remember my wife wanted to watch this movie, some animated movie. I think it was Mexico, with South America, Mexico, and this was the kind of theme, is that these offerings have to be made to your departed ancestors because it helps them in some way. And it also keeps them alive. I mean, the soul is eternal, but it keeps them in that situation for a longer time, maybe possibly a situation of enjoyment. Okay, so by these offerings being made, then the departed family member who has passed away can be helped. Some of the suffering can be reduced, and then they can attain the status of what's called pitra. They can attain the status of an ancestor, and that is also a particular place where one reunites with family. And if you continue to receive offerings while you've reunited your family in this place beyond, after death, then if those offerings continue, you can stay there longer and enjoy, because it's said to be an enjoyable place, this Pitraloka. It's considered to be a part of the moon, actually, a department in the moon. And one can actually enjoy there for a long time. So long, Prabhupada explains, so long the offerings keep coming. And then finally, you have to come back down to the earth after you've enjoyed. Those offerings won't keep forever because, this connection to the ancestors really is just the children, the parents, the grandparents, and the great grandparents. And then it doesn't go beyond that. So that's kind of who you're helping by making these offerings. So eventually, those beings there, they're only there for some time, and then they want to come, and then they have to come back down to the earth and live again and act again. It's interesting because the heavens and the hells are places of reaping your result. Reaping, like it says in the Bible that you reap what you sow. So in the middle planetary systems is where we do the sowing, like here on Earth right now. This is where you do the sowing. You're acting, there's action, and there's going to be eventual consequences. But the heavens and hells are places of just where you just reap the results of that. And so in other words, they're both temporary until you have to come back to the area, the middle area of action, and again act, and again make choices and decisions. That's not really happening in the heavens or hells. It's just your karma exhausting. It's just getting the results of karma. And it can be increased a little bit, as we're mentioning here, by this Shraddha ceremony. Okay, maybe you're meant to be in joy for only a certain amount of time, but because these offerings are coming, you can stay there a little longer. But it makes you wonder, is it good to stay there longer? Because after all, you have to come back and then you have choice again. And this is the real place to be. The Earth, the middle planetary system, is the best place to be. Because from here, we're creating our destiny. In the other places, you're just reaping. You're just getting the results of what you've created from the past. And so in a sense, if you're prolonging somebody's stay in a heavenly realm, is that actually service? Right? Okay, they're staying there longer, they're enjoying a little longer, but it's temporary. And they have to come back here again and come to the place of choice, the place of decision, the place of action, and get another chance that they can actually get out of this whole wheel. The wheel of birth and death includes the hells and the heavens and the earth, the middle, upper, and lower planetary systems. The whole wheel goes around and around these places. So you're still bound. So we're actually, even though it's Kali Yuga, we talk about the miseries of the material world and so forth, we're actually, if you look at the whole universal material creation, we're in a pretty good place, because from here, major changes can be made, new actions. When a devotee comes into our life and shows us something completely new, and then something completely spiritual, and we align ourselves with it. This is much more difficult in the hellish realms and in the heavens. And some people say it's impossible from those positions. Some people say it may be some rare circumstance where you can elevate yourself, but for the most part, and it makes sense, right? Because even in this Earth planet, if you're really, really, really suffering, so you're born in total poverty in some harsh place, atmosphere, politically, whatever it may be, it's hard to make spiritual advancement because of that. If you're really, really, really enjoying here, if you're a billionaire, it's hard to make spiritual advancement. But if you're somewhere in the middle area, it's a little easier. You have a mix of happiness and distress. So the same is true of the cosmic world, the heavens and the hells. So is this Shraddha ceremony therefore recommended for devotees? Should we do it? Should we not do it? One thing we can say is that we definitely see, if we look back at our tradition, we have to hear the answer to this question from our acharyas. And what we see from our acharyas is more and more there's a de-emphasis in performing this Shraddha ceremony. And people will say, but Lord Chaitanya, he performed this ceremony for his father. He went to Gaya when his father passed away and performed the Shraddha ceremony. But if you look closely at that pastime, there's also the beginning of this de-emphasis, because when he was he met his spiritual master there, Ishvara Puri, and he said after meeting him, now my coming to Gaia has become successful, now that I've met my spiritual master. It wasn't successful by the Shraddha ceremony. That Prabhupada explains in one place, that was kind of a pretense for him going to Gaia. Actually, he was going to meet Ishvara Puri, his guru, and take shelter. And the kind of pretense of offering the Shraddha ceremony, he went to this place. But really, he said, now it has become successful, my trip to Gaia, because I have met my spiritual master, Ishvara Puri. So even there, we see a little bit of a kind of de-emphasizing of this Shraddha ceremony. And then some will say, but Advaitacharya, he also performed the Shraddha ceremony for his father, his departed father. And in that pastime too, there's a kind of de-emphasis of the ceremony because who was there? All the brahmanas were there. So he had a ceremony, there was a ritual, it was performed, but the plate, the first plate, it said you give after the offering is made, you give the first plate of that offering to the most exalted personality there. All the brahmanas that are there, you give to the most exalted personality. And Advaitacharya decided to give to Haridas Thakur, and this shocked everybody there. All the brahmanas were shocked and upset. He's not even born in Hindu family, he's born in Muslim family. And even Haridas Thakur felt a little embarrassed. Is this appropriate? He doubted also if this should be done. But Advaitacharya was very firm that no, this is Shastra. I'm giving to the Vaisnav, the purest Vaisnav, the most exalted personality here. I give to Haridas Thakur. And see, so in both these pastimes, it's the beginning of starting to put more emphasis on just the Vaishnav, of pure bhakti, of that relationship to the Vaishnav, making that the real important factor. Because especially if something is in the Shastra, to take it away, you have to be very careful and it has to be done very slowly, right? There's some rule in the Shastra. You don't just pull it out suddenly, abruptly. Too many people will be disturbed and shocked, but you have to gradually start to remove it if it's no longer necessary. Because even things in the Shastra, there are certain eternal principles, but there are certain things with the changing of time, place, and circumstance, they become less important, or they become replaced by something else. And so finally, with the Shraddha ceremony, when we come to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he actually incorporated something new, and he called it Vaishnav Shraddha. This is what we should do if we have a family member that dies. And what did he create? Basically, it's like a traditional Hare Krishna program. You can bring the picture of your departed ancestor to the temple. You have the devotees come together. You chant the holy name. You have kirtan. You have a class that someone can speak the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam. You have prasadam offered to the deities, offered to all the devotees. Chanting of the holy name is going on. So this is what we always do for everything, right? Well, this is what we should do also when a family member passes. Instead of a particular, finding the brahmanas who are qualified. We know the brahmanas are no longer so much qualified. And that's why other ceremonies are no longer effective in our age. And so what do we do if a family member dies? We do what we always do as devotees. We can bring their picture to the temple. We can have a program. We can ask for the prayers of the devotees, for the soul of our loved one. We serve prasadam to the devotees. We have class. We have kirtan. So this was incorporated by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. That this is what the Shraddha ceremony is, from the Karma Kanda section of the Vedas. And if we actually look at it closely, again, is it even beneficial that we keep feeding the ancestors who are in this in-between place? They're enjoying a little more by us. We keep them there longer. Is that good? Or should they not now come back down and in a certain way start fresh with new actions new choices, and then get free from the material world. So we can prolong that. We do that, right? Because when we're enjoying in this world, we want to prolong it. This is attachment. This is actually attachment. And even this Pitra Loka, in one sense, it's just extended family attachment. All our family is there and we're still together, we're still holding on. So then how should we see our families? We should be loving, we should be responsible. We should do our duty. We should also see that there's a soul, this is a soul, and I want the ultimate benefit of this soul. Not that we all just continue to enjoy together and we're so attached that we're actually preventing people from doing things, from moving on. We have to allow for that also, for the movement of our family. So there's love, there's respect, there's forgiveness. All of these things are there. And also another great thing we can do for our family members is that we ourselves become sincere in becoming a devotee. This will give great benefit because there is connection, there is attachment. So if we ourselves think, well, actually the best thing I can do for my family is to become a sincere, humble devotee myself. That's true. So we treat them with love, respect, responsibility, forgiveness. All of this should be there. And then we also strive to become sincere devotees. And there's a nice verse when Shukadev Goswami is speaking to Parikshit, who's going to die in 7 days, right? Now, in today's verse, there's this term, samparayikam, which means the funeral ceremony, or it means the rituals for the next life. Now, interestingly, in the second canto, chapter 1, text 14, Shukadev Goswami tells Parikshit, he also uses the same word, tavat yat samparayikam. And he tells him, you yourself should perform the rituals for your next life now. He says, Maharaj Parikshit, now your duration of life is limited to 7 more days. So during this time, you can perform all those rituals which are needed for the best purpose of your next life. And what does he tell him to do? He doesn't say, now you go get, we're going to have a fire yagya and we get the brahmanas, get prepared for your next life. He tells him to continue hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord. And actually the same term is used for rituals for the next life, samparayikam. So I just want to look at this purport because Prabhupada will give further detail. This is, I think, important for us. Shukadev Goswami, after citing the example of Maharaj Katvanga, who prepared himself for the next life within a very short time, encouraged Maharaj Parikshit by saying that since he still had 7 days at his disposal, he could easily take advantage of the time to prepare himself for the next life. Indirectly, the Goswami told Maharaj Parikshit that he should take shelter of the sound representation of the Lord for the 7 days still remaining in the duration of his life and thus get himself liberated. In other words, everyone can best prepare himself for the next life simply by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, as it was recited by Shukadev Goswami to Maharaj Parikshit. The rituals are not formal, but there are also some favorable conditions which are required to be carried out as instructed hereafter. So interesting, Prabhupada said these rituals are not formal. They're not like these formal Vedic rituals, but it's the essence, Bhagavat Dharma, hearing and chanting, hear the Bhagavatam in the association of devotees. This is what we do. And then the next few verses will also describe some details. But we learn from Bhagavatam, if you have a moment left to live, just a few moments, what should you do? You should do kirtan. But if you have, let's say, some months or some years left to live, what should you do? You should also do kirtan, but you should also do hearing of the Bhagavatam. Because the more we hear, we combine the hearing with the chanting, the more our chanting will start to become more focused and take shape, actually by hearing Harikatha, then we start to develop a relationship with Krishna. And so when we chant, it's not just, you know, it's not just we're saying the name with no connection, but our relationship starts to unfold by hearing Harikatha, by hearing the pastimes of the Lord and his activities and how wonderful he is. We start to appreciate that more and more. And we're starting to create sambandha, a relationship with the Lord, so that when we do chant, it is very powerful, it's very intimate. You're chanting for the person, you're chanting the name of the person you actually love from the relationship that's been created by hearing. So if we have more time, then the thing to do, according to Bhagavatam, is to hear the Bhagavatam and chant. And if you just have a few moments, the thing to do is chant, just do kirtan, right? Because it's a kind of emergency situation. Just chant, just be around devotees and let the kirtan enter into your heart and soul. So, so this is the kind of shift according to time, place, and circumstance, where this used to be a ceremony that was performed. I wanted to a little bit just explain what this ceremony is and why it was done and what we're actually meant to do today. We have a greater family than just our own little families. We have the family of the Vaishnavas, right? This is our family. And this family, this connection, and this attachment is good and healthy, right? So we mentioned some things of our relationship to our own family, what it should be like. It should be loving, it should be responsible, but we have to see through the eyes of scripture and understand what's actually beneficial for them. See on the soul level, the level of the soul. All right, we ourselves strive to become devotees. This will be greatly beneficial for our family. And also we include our family in the greater family of Vaishnavas. Who is the patriarch of our family of devotees? Srila Prabhupada. He is the Pita. He is the father to some, the grandfather to some others, and the great grandfather to others. And we're all united in love for Lord Ram, for Lord Ramchandra. This is our family. So this is the shift that has to take place for us. And this was encouraged by our acharyas, especially Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So last thing I wanted to say is something about Lord Ramchandra's kindness here in this verse. We sometimes wonder, how do we deal with evil or injustices in this world? Right? How do we deal with evil in this world? We can learn this here from the Lord and his devotee, Vibhishana. You know, Ramchandra did not just allow Ravana to go on forever creating so much harm. He did what was necessary. He did the needful. He killed him. He removed him. He was, a very wicked, evil person. So on that level, he did what was necessary. But if you notice here, he did it with no hate. He never hated Ravana, actually. You know, when Vibhishana, Ravana's brother, came to the side of Lord Ram, some doubted that. Some associates of Lord Ramchandra said, well, we don't know about Vibhishana because, after all, he's the brother of Ravana. And he's saying now he wants to be, with us and be your devotee. But if something becomes more intense, if this war, the pressure increases, the blood relative is very powerful. He may go back to his brother. But Lord Ramchandra, so he has come for shelter, and we will give him shelter. And Hanuman also could detect that he was very sincere. And so there was a kind of, some didn't quite see it that way, but Lord Ramchandra said, what to speak of Vibhishan? Even if Ravana was to come to me right now and ask for shelter, I would immediately give it to him. So on the material level, on the physical level, Lord Ramchandra did what was necessary in this world. But if you notice, there was never hatred. He said, if he comes to me even right now, after everything he did, he stole his wife, he stole Sita, not the real Sita. but still, he was very wicked. And even with that, Lord Ramchandra said, if he comes at any moment, falls at my feet, begs forgiveness, I will immediately give him my shelter. Right? So, and then we're seeing here in this verse that, okay, now he has been killed. That needed to happen. And now he tells Vibhishan, now perform the Shraddha ceremony and protect him from going to hell. In other words, now let's do our duty and reduce his suffering if possible. You see, this is like Prabhupada would, this is the ever well-wisher. You take care of what you need to do on the material level, but the heart is full of benevolence, actually, not hatred. And this is the nature of God, and this is the nature of the devotee of God. Even Vibhishan as well, he was, he came to the side of Lord Ramchandra. He went against his brother Ravana. But then we see the scene where he's also, after Ravana was there lying dead, Vibhishana was crying, and he went to him. And then he was the one to perform this ceremony for the protection of his brother. He was regretting that his brother was lost and never saw the right way, and was getting more entangled and he felt compassion in his heart. And so when Ravana died, Vibhishan cried. And at the same time, he did his duty of this particular ceremony, which can help Ravana. So we do the needful in this world, but we do it with no hate in our hearts. It's like, it doesn't matter in one sense, it doesn't matter what president you vote for. But if you hate the other one, then we're under the influence of Maya, not Krishna's shelter. It doesn't matter if you get the vaccine or you don't get the vaccine. But if by promoting one side, you hate the other side and you hate the other point of view, you're not under the shelter of Krishna. You're under the shelter of the personality of Kali. Because the devotee doesn't have this kind of hatred in the heart. And it's actually like a trick of Maya, because we think we're doing what's good, what's right. But we see what comes into the heart while we fight for what's right and what's good. There's also becoming a hatred towards the opposite. And that's where we're fooled. And then the other side too, they're the same thing. Well, no, we're doing actually what's good. This president is actually better. And the other one, we all hate. And the others are thinking, no, this president is better. And the other, we all hate. I'm just using some modern examples that are very charged right now. You can get the vaccine or not get the vaccine and go back to Godhead. That's actually not so important. You can use your intelligence, make the best judgment, ask some people maybe, and then make a decision, and then do it and just be detached. Now whatever comes, comes. And I don't hate anybody for doing anything else. And now I fix my mind at the lotus feet of Krishna. Because in this material world, there are always choices. So seek the guidance of devotees. Check your own motives. Use your intelligence, get some information, make a choice, and then just drop it. Let it go. Be totally neutral. Just do what you think is best and be neutral, because it's all the material level. And if you get too into the material level, then you'll be entangled in love and hate, like and dislike. And this is the duality. This is the dualistic consciousness that we get entrapped in. And just you fight so hard in this one life for something, and in the next life you may be fighting on the opposite side. Because actually when you fight for one of the side, the dualities are everywhere, right? Happiness, distress, heat, cold, good, bad. When you fight very strongly for one of those, what you think is right, you actually invoke the opposite. We invoke it. You can see that when you really, this is the trick of Maya. With the opposites are always alternating. I'm going to really get into this one thing, and then you see other people in the world who have a different opinion. You invoke them. You invoke them to now fight against you. And this is the game of the material world. So better to detach from it, Make your choices, do the needful. You see that again, Ravana here does the needful. Lord Ram. He sees Ravana's creating all this havoc. He's, okay, let's remove him. Ramchandras is a Kshatriya, a leader. Kill him. Just remove him completely from creating all this harm, but no hate in his heart. Now perform the Shraddha ceremony for his benefit. And Vibhishan also, as a devotee of the Lord, has that same benevolent heart, crying for the death of Ravana. For the death of Ravana. He was also kind of like a lord, but of the material world. So this is our approach. We can, and how do we have no hate? That's the big question, right? Okay, so yeah, fight for something in this world, make decisions, but have no hate. It's easy to say. How can we actually do the needful in this world, whatever that may be, according to the time and the place and the circumstance, and still not have hate by doing it? We have to see that this is you have to see the relationship of having no hate to getting absorbed in Krishna consciousness. Because when the love of God awakens in our heart, there is no hate. So when we chant, when we hear, when we associate with devotees, we're trying to reawaken our love for God. So we should see the relationship between our spiritual activities and removing hate from the heart. It's not just an intellectual thing, you try to remove the hate, or you think about it a lot or something like that. That will never have the power to change us. But if we can awaken our love for God through chanting, through hearing, associating with devotees, then with the rising of that sun in our heart, then all darkness is dissipated. All darkness is removed. So therefore, it's funny, I used to chant a long time ago, when I first became a devotee. I was living with my sister. We had a little house together, and I was in the room just chanting, like in a little light on, just chanting, and she'd walk by and she'd open the door and she'd just shake her head and say, there he goes again, saving the world, by just, sitting in his room praying, saving the world. This is kind of like, but actually, what's the greatest thing we can do for this world? If just 1 people, if 10 people, if 50 people could awaken love of God in their hearts, just see the power of that. Just see that everyone that comes in their sphere, like Srila Prabhupada, 1 person with true love of God, look what he accomplished. Right? And then just imagine, 200 people who attain love of God. And then the people around them, the influence, especially now with all the media and how things can go so far, so fast. Things are so much accelerated in our present moment, that if this is accomplished, this is the greatest thing that can be done, to be an example of a devotee, to be an example, love of God, of one who truly loves God and has no hate in their heart. Coming across a person who has no hate, who does what's necessary on the material level, but with no hate, just moving through everything very smoothly with love, with compassion. So this is the way to get rid of hate. And we have to awaken our love for God. And what do we do in the meantime? Well, I have one other thing I can say that we can do in the meantime if we haven't awakened this love of God. We're in the process of it. If you're attracted to anything about Krishna consciousness, you're in the process of awakening your love for God. If something feels right about all of this, if something in you longs for Krishna consciousness, that is your love of God starting to awaken. So you stay connected. Don't criticize devotees. Don't criticize anyone, if possible. But if it's not fully awakened and we still feel there is some hatred, there is some resentment in my heart, what do I do about it? Well, Krishna also gives us some advice in the Gita. He says one should see this world. How do we see this world? One should see that the modes of nature alone are active within people. Right? So this may be helpful. This is Gyan. So it's not the awakening of love of God, but of God, but jnana is also helpful in removing some of the illusion of hating, because you can see a person, right? May say a very wicked person, Ravana, whoever it may be, the little Ravana that's in your life, whoever that is. And you can understand that from what we understand of our philosophy, that this is a pure soul who's fallen, just like me, who's fallen into this material world and has become entangled and lost. And now the modes of nature, they've surrendered to the material energy. And the modes of nature, they've made choices that have just brought them to a very evil place even, right? This is what's happened. And so therefore, I forgive them. I forgive them. And I need them to also forgive me for judging them so harshly, for hating them. If you have that spiritual vision, these things come up. You'll start to see even people who are doing terrible things. There can be an awakening of compassion for them. Wow, look how lost. Look what's happened. The pure spirit soul has come to this. But I forgive you for it. Because after all, I'm here too. I'm in this material world too. I've also made wrong choices. I've also harmed myself and harmed others in different ways. So I forgive you. And I also need your forgiveness because I have resentment towards you, because I hate you. So I need your forgiveness as well. So this is not even, and when the love of God awakens, then this all is spontaneous and natural. If it's not awakened, at least we can use Krishna's teachings in the Gita. It's also Krishna. It's also coming from Krishna. This is not ordinary knowledge, gyan. But we take shelter of also what he's saying. And he's saying that the devotee in this world, how should they see this world? That the modes of nature alone are active. We're responsible because we've separated ourselves from the Supreme. We've come under the shelter of the material energy instead of the shelter of Krishna. And now the modes are active. They've kind of taken the lead in our lives. And because of that, I'm harming others, harming myself. We can see that. We can feel compassion for that. Right? It's not that I'm out of it and somebody else is just doing well. I'm also in it. We're all in it together. But we're trying to awaken. And to awaken more and more spiritually, it's required that we start to see in this way, act in this way, remove the criticism, the resentment, the hatred from the heart. And finally, by love for Lord Ramchandra, by hearing this Hari Katha, these pastimes of Lord Ram, then more and more this love will awaken, and hatred, resentment, all completely gone. It's not in the soul. Those things are not in the soul at all. So when we awaken to the soul level, I'm a servant of Krishna, then imagine living in this world where you're still doing everything necessary. You know what to do in each circumstance, and your heart is free, and your heart just sees with the eye of compassion and love. So this is what will happen if we continue to hear about Lord Ramchandra, associate with devotees, and chant the holy name. So thank you. Sorry I went a little bit over. I was told I could go over, and so I guess I went more than I wanted to, but I'll also give a few moments if anyone has any thoughts, comments, questions.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Gail, you're fast on this, Gail.
Yeah, because you always spark stuff that that are like burning to me. So, with this, you were saying that to try to eliminate this hatred that we have of others from our heart, we should remember that it gets in the way of the love for Krishna that we're trying to cultivate. But if you don't really have so much spontaneous attraction, if you're at a very beginning stage of spiritual life, that might not resonate as a big inspiring motive, So I mean, yes, I mean it's helpful, but like when you're in the moment of your hatred of a person, you know, it might not be so inspiring. But you know, we should do it because, as you say, over time it will take effect. But I was also thinking that I'm sorry, this question is going to seem a little disjointed, but you know, when we hate somebody, isn't it that we do so because we are seeing the person's material personality as the actual person? I think you were calling it the modes. You know, when we see a person acting out in the modes, right? We hate that person, but acting out in the modes means we're seeing the person, we're identifying the person with their body, essentially, which is their material personality. So maybe if we remind ourselves that, well, this person is just identifying with their body and acting accordingly, but they are not that body. And therefore, to hate the person is to ourselves identify the person with their body, which is the same thing that the person himself is doing, the perpetrator, let's call him. You know, so I don't know. I mean, it's an intellectual process at this stage, you know, but I don't know if what you think about that as a motive for trying to not hate, you know, to just remember that your material personality, you know, which is in the modes, is not the actual person.
Yeah, that's perfect, Gail. I mean, like you said, we have to kind of use Krishna's teachings as well. I mean, they're there for a reason, the knowledge, and Krishna's teaching us these things, so we should want to see that way. It's not completely intellectual. If we have a sincere desire to apply what Krishna is giving in the Gita, and just as you said, this is how we're encouraged to try to see that the soul, again, the soul has become entrapped in the material body, material mind, and has become very entangled. So when we see that what we hate in a person is obviously, you cannot hate the pure soul. It's just when we're connected to our own souls and we're seeing the souls of others, there's nothing but appreciation, love. And so we're misidentifying the person with their minds, with their bodies, and we hate that. And I just wanted to say something too about what you first mentioned. Definitely this thing of not hating, people who have harmed us and so forth. This is a process, and we have to be really sometimes patient with ourselves. If something has happened to us that has really hurt us and we've been harmed, it's like you hear this message of, oh, just don't hate, don't hate them. That's why we need this spiritual knowledge. We need the association of devotees. We need to take shelter of our spiritual practice so that we can actually awaken love, and that it actually spontaneously will be able to forgive, will be able to let go. But this is quite a process. And it's not like I'm telling, somebody who's been deeply harmed and is really like in that space right in the here and now to just get over it. That's not quite the message. But we want to see the connection between Krishna consciousness and being able to get over it eventually. So we become sincere in our desire to actually overcome it. Because when we hate somebody, to forgive a person really means to let go of resentment from our own heart. It means resentment has got in there somehow. And I don't want it. I want to let it go. We should have that desire. No matter what anybody has done, somehow it's made its way into my heart. It's not the true me, but it's there. I want to let it go. How do I let it go? Let me figure out how to let this go. So it's not about just you forgive the person for doing some terrible thing. It's also just you letting go of resentment from your own heart. And then again, on the material level, you may have to distance yourself. Doesn't mean go and be around that person and continue to associate. Distance yourself. Like I said, Lord Ramchandra here killed Ravana. That's how he dealt with him. Remove him completely. He's gone too far. Destroy him. Okay, that one, he's a Kshatriya, he's a warrior, he's a leader. He's he's able to do such things. But he had no hatred for Ravana. I saw a hand.
Hare Krishna Ganesham Prabhu. Dana
Hare
pronounced.
Krishna.
I'm sorry, Gail, are you finished with your questions?
Gail, you better just go, because Gail, I'm sure she might have a few more under her sleeve.
No, Athena should definitely go, but I do have one.
Please go if Ganesham Prabhu has time. Please finish your thought. No. My questions today are not that long, hopefully. So please, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, we're both hoggers, so I'll take you up on that. Yeah, just one follow-up is that, we shouldn't identify we should identify people with their bodies when they're behaving badly, but I think it's also tempting to identify people with their bodies when they're behaving, well, like in the mode of goodness. But that's the other side of the same coin. So, what should be our internal dialogue when we see a person who, may not be a pure devotee behaving very nicely?
Yeah, well, we can understand that. That's very nice. That's very good. So, like, the mode of goodness is better than the mode of ignorance, is better than the mode of passion. But we should remember that that's what's happening here. These are the mode. This is another mode of nature. It's not transcendental connection to the Supreme Lord. So I don't judge because of that. But I see somebody doing something altruistic or so forth. We can appreciate that. Well, this is nice. This is showing the movement towards goodness, and the goodness is superior to the other modes. And the reason why it's actually superior, as a devotee, we should understand this. The reason why the mode of goodness is superior to passion and ignorance is because from the mode of goodness, it's a little easier to take that step into transcendence. It's a little easier to connect to the spiritual level. That's why it's valuable. But if you take out the spiritual level, and then people are just moving through the modes, and sometimes they're in goodness and they come back down. And so we should just, with those eyes, see that this is what's happening. So we're also not like blown away by this good activity that somebody's done, and we're not like bewildered by it. And we think, well, this is even better than devotional service, because look what they're doing. They're making this change in the world. We shouldn't be fooled in that way. Actually, a person who's just sincerely chanting, associating with devotees, has a guru, a connection, is finding ways to serve according to Krishna's desire. This is a superior level to anything done on the material platform. So no matter how good it is. Anyway, I'll just say that.
Yes, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Your turn, Athena.
Thank you so much, Gail. And thank you so much, Ganesham Prabhu, for staying on so long for entertaining our questions. I had a few, and I guess I'll start with how when anyone who worships the ancestors, they go to the planet of the ancestors, which is Pitraloka. And we see that in one sense in today's world, say in the African communities, it's very much about the ancestors and, reuniting with the ancestors. And we understand that's, say, like a heavenly planet or place of enjoyment. But how can we make sense of it if, say, your grandfather passes and he goes to this Pitraloka? For there to be any enjoyment, he must be enjoying with his family, perhaps his grandfather, his wife that passed, so your grandmother. But those souls, you assume, have already transmigrated. They wouldn't stay for a long time. And say, even if like someone's father passed very shortly and they go to this ancestral realm, his stay is longer, but for him to associate with his ancestors, which are many more lifetimes removed or, levels removed, they've already moved on. And, in this realm, so how do we even make sense of such a process? Because the body the
Right.
soul does transmigrate?
Well, our attachment is not to our great, 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 great grandfather. So if they've moved on, we don't mind so much. Like even in this life, right? Who are we around? We're around our parents, our grandparents. Maybe when a child is very young, it's their great grandparents. They also have some relationship. So they're around who they want to be around, which is their immediate family. But like you said, you can't stay there forever. So when you go too far back, you're right. Those beings have already come back down and are living up perhaps a whole different kind of a whole different situation, a whole different life. And so, but for those who, like say grandparents are there and then, you know, their children also are following this karma kanda of the Vedas. By the way, you don't, to go to Pitraloka is a pretty special thing. It basically means you're a very strict follower of the Vedic literature. So it's not that we all just go to this place and we all have this connection with former family, but to really be in this particular loka where the enjoyment is very great, it's said that you have to perform the karma kanda section of the Vedas very, very strictly. And there's family cohesion. Like that doesn't even exist anymore, family cohesion. Imagine like the people have, I just met some man the other day who's dying, in the hospital. And, his family was Christian and I went to see him and he was a Buddhist, his sister was a Catholic, it's like all these different spiritual traditions and the family was kind of broken up and there's divorces and there's all this is kind of like the present. So it's very unlikely. This is another reason why the Pitraloka idea is not so relevant anymore unless you have strong family cohesion, a shared spiritual tradition, rituals that you're following that are very clear, brahmanas, all that has to be in place. And then there's a possibility of going to one of these places. Athena, I know you said you had a few questions, but I saw another hand go up the same time as yours, and I wanted to give Rupa Chandra Prabhu a chance to ask a question.
Sure, no problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Hare Krishna Prabhu, Ghanshyam Prabhu.
Haribol, Prabhu.
Haribol. I think you kind of answered my question, but I just want to ask it again. I think you just answered it. So my question is like in the Bhagavatam, Lord Ramachandra and also Nrsingadev, I can post the verse in the chat. He tells Prahlad Maharaj that he should perform the Shraddha ceremony for Hiranyakashipu, and the exact translation says, "My dear child, your father has already been purified just by the touch of my body at the time of his death. Nonetheless, the duty of a son is to perform the Shraddha ritualistic ceremony after his father's death, so that his father may be promoted to a planetary system where he may become a good citizen and a devotee." And I also completely understand your point of how the Shraddha ceremony is ritualistic. It is not really so much in the spirit of recent Vaishnava acharyas. But I just feel like a little bit confused. Like here, on one hand, you have the Srimad Bhagavatam, our topmost scripture, you have the Supreme Lord Himself, giving an instruction. Then we have a recent.
Prabhu, what was that verse? What was that verse?
It's 7:10:22, Srimad Bhagavatam.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we have Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who at least apparently is giving a different instruction, maybe not different, but maybe changing it a little bit. So how do I reconcile, because we're told we should have the sadhu, guru and shastra should be aligned, so what do I do in a situation like this? Should I just move where my faith takes me and then feel guilty for not following one or the other? It's quite bewildering, to me. So I just wanted to put that out there. I just don't know how to deal with this,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this is why what takes the most important role in making decisions about this is what the acharyas are now saying, because we know that other rituals are no longer, other things are no longer relevant, even if they're in the Shastra, right? There are certain things, Ashrameda Yagya, no one's performing this anymore. A lot of, especially when it's connected to qualified brahmanas chanting the mantras. So this Shraddha ceremony is also very much dependent on that. Is dependent on the right mantras. The mantras is what has the power in this ceremony. So again, if we use that in other situations by saying, well, the brahmanas are no longer so qualified, so therefore we don't do this ritual, it's very rare to find such personalities who can actually chant just like, fire yagyas and so forth. But so what takes precedence is the acharyas, and even that verse that you quoted, again, of course, it's in the Bhagavatam, lots of places, because again, now we're going back 5,000 years. Think about that, 5,000 years, Vedic culture. I mean, of course, Nrsingadev, this is a whole other, this this is like, so then we require the adjustments to know what the adjustments are. Things will change a little bit. Some things won't, some things will. Sometimes the form has to change a little bit, but the essence is still there, right? So we see, that's why I was saying, we see like this from the time of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to the present, more and more a slow moving away from it, from this Shraddha ceremony. And again, it can't be immediate because that would be too difficult for many people. Just like right now, there's the Pope in the Catholic Church. So he's the Pope. A lot of Christian churches, they now allow for women priests. Okay, Catholic Church is still not allowing for that. So it's like this change is coming. That it will happen eventually in the Catholic Church. Will they'll also make an allowance for that because the momentum is so strong. But if that decision was to happen abruptly, then so many people will be upset. People who are against that idea, whether you're for it, against it, that's not my point here. I'm just saying that when changes have to take place in religions with time. And Shastras, these are very, again, we have to hear from the acharyas, what can be changed, what can't, what's the new form of it. Just like yagya, right? That's always the way of attaining, perfection, liberation. It's always yagya. Formerly, just imagine the scene, all these hundreds of brahmanas sitting, there's a fire pit, there's yagya, there's offerings of ghee up to the different gods. This was happening, this was the process. So now yagya takes the form of Harinam Sankirtan yagya, right? So it's the age has changed, the method has changed. So even the verse that you quoted were Nrsingadev, but if you look closely at the purport, you start to see there are again a little bit of a de-emphasis. Prabhupada says that this is just an etiquette to perform this Shraddha ceremony, taking a little bit of the strength from it by saying that. And of course, there are letters you can read from Srila Prabhupada where he simply encouraged to have basically a nice program. Now, this is easier for me because I'm from the West. So if you have an Indian family and this is a tradition, what I would say is that you can do it, but you should do it under the guidance of a Vaishnava. And in other words, understand how to make this sort of Krishnized or more connected to the essence and less about just some, you can go to some South Indian temple and it's just, this is being done, the Shraddha ceremony, and it's just very ritualistic and it's very karmakanda. And it's like a little bit disconnected. Who are these brahmanas? Who are these, what is the ritual? So it can still be done if there's that strong connection to it as an Indian person may have, because this is kind of expected, right? It's expected of your family. So it's a little more difficult to just say, hey, let's just have a program at the temple. Everything's fine. Your family might have a heart attack. But at least, okay, go about it in such a way where you're getting guided by a Vaishnava. How to do this in a Vaishnav way. Because I'm going to do it. There's somehow this expectation and it's kind of strong. Like I said, easier for me. It's my family. And again, my family too. There's divorces, people have moved. There's nobody in Pitra Loka, believe me. My great-grandfather was a boxer, It's like, they weren't like, they're not in some planet with, enjoying. And so we have to even doubt if this is relevant anymore. Even for an Indian person. Has there been, 3 or 4 generations of strictly following of the Karmakanda? Where you're actually going to do some benefit? Do we have qualified brahmanas? Lots of question marks. So therefore, if it has to be done because of your family situation, you can do it. And I guess my only suggestion would be that you get the guidance of an advanced Vaishnav through that whole process. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you very much. Very, very satisfying and well-rounded answer.
Yeah, thank you for your question. Adi Purush Prabhu. You're
wonderful
muted.
class, wonderful explanations, wonderful questions. The last question, what says, engage in devotional service, everything is accomplished, many generations will benefit. Gail's wonderful question, how to distinguish between the modes of material nature and the person. Jesus said, love the sinner, hate the sin. Hate the sin, love the sinner. So that's a very clear distinction.
Mm-hmm.
And then Shastra says, when a devotee experiences reversal, he thinks, Shastra says, this is due to my past misdeeds. Not, it's coming from that person. No, this is due to my past misdeeds. I deserve a lot worse. Krishna's giving me a token. And then that person goes on in devotional service to Krishna. So wonderful questions, simple Shastric answers to all three questions. Hate the sin, love the sinner.
Okay. Thank you, Ayush Prabhu. Anyone else want to say something? I have time if you have time.
I think there's a question in the chat.
We got a question in the chat. Could somebody, let's see, what is it? Well, how's it start? There's a bunch in the chat. I see it. Thank you for this insightful class. Is evil just extreme ignorance that must be tolerated and forgiven? Or is there pure evil in the world, as people sometimes say, that one must fight? How do we tell the difference? It can get pretty bad, but ultimately it is ignorance. It's a lost soul who can actually do something terribly evil in this world. And when we see, just like mass killings and so forth, just like we think this is evil. But now think for a moment of that soul and the journey of that soul and the fallen position and the ignorance and the covering, and then the choices that have just put a person more and more into a hole, and to the point where the mind is so twisted that there's actually a pleasure from doing the greatest harm. It's a very twisted state, but we understand that it's coming from a place of falling. Now, the word ignorance is very good actually for us to understand, because sometimes the way even Prabhupada pronounced it, he would say ignorance, which shows us that the word ignorance is connected to ignoring something. What are we ignoring? The original fall, the original sin, the original leaving is a kind of a part of us that wants to ignore that Krishna is the supreme. I want to make an experiment now and see what it's like to be the supreme. I want to be in control of my own way. I want to do things my own way. And so I'm not so happy about this situation that someone else is the supreme. So you see that there's a kind of, whatever you want to call it, a kind of resentment, a kind of envy. Shastras often say it's envy of God. But something in us that just wants to go in a different direction for ourselves, self-interest, separate interest. And then once that happens, then you can really go down into a very lost situation, position where it looks like pure evil that one is performing. And in one sense, we can call it that. But this is the journey of the soul from that pure consciousness to a kind of covered consciousness, and then certain activities and thoughts and feelings, when we cultivate it in the wrong direction more and more, it takes this form that we could call evil, but is actually coming from ignorance. So that's, anyone else?
Hare Krishna Ganesham Prabhu. I'll ask a question if there are no other questions.
Sure.
Thank you so much for your time. Wow, I really love that answer, and actually all your answers to these wonderful questions in this discussion. I guess I had a question from the beginning of your class that tied to one of your previous classes. And it's interesting because you are a chaplain and you hear all of these experiences of kind of near death and people who might come back. And you say, I remember you had something along the lines of truly what you desire, or perhaps what you followed is what you think is the end. So some people say, I figured it out. There's nothing after this, blank, nothing. And then some say, oh, I see the light. And then you mentioned that there are people who actually like see the Yamadutas. But in today's class, you mentioned that with all these 101 nadis, there are nadis. I understand there's, I don't even think just in the yoga path, but I think I read or heard that if you're going to hell, you leave through the bottom half of the body versus if you're going to heaven through like the mouth or the kind of upper part. Um, but those are also nadis too. So does that mean even if you're going to hell, you follow the quote unquote light? But then how do we tie that to those who see nothing? And then you had mentioned the Yamadutas grab you to get judged by Yamaraj, which if that happens, you most likely lived a more sinful life. Do they also see the light too to get to that point? Or is the only light only if you're going somewhere up?
Yeah, the light is just giving you the direction to go. So in all cases, it's said that one of these nadis will light up. And that just is giving you, this is happening within the body. You know, the soul is in the heart, and there's an exit from the body. And so a certain pathway lights up. It could be down, it could be up. So light doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be auspicious. It just means it's giving you the direction to go. And it's so you can go down, going to a worse place, a hellish place, and it will also be through a path that's lit up. And sometimes it's said that like you mentioned, the Yamadutas, so they can, we talked about there are different guides as our journey continues. A guide can be an ancestor, a guide could be a deva, a guide could be, also the Yamadutas are guides, but they're a little bit more forceful with their guiding. So they can pull you through this nadi, through this channel, this lit up channel. They can pull you out of the body and take you to Yamaraj or take you to wherever you're going. So yeah, the light is just a kind of indication according to your consciousness, karma, but it said that the super soul actually informs the soul which way to go.
Thank you. So just to check, even if you're going to hell, the light is up until the point where you leave the body, and then after that, that's taken. So every soul will see the light,
Right.
And then for those when you said in your experience they see nothing. At what point is that when they say there's nothing after this life? How would you interpret that?
Yeah, that's also a kind of because consciousness is so complex, right? So lots of possibilities are there. So if you just see total darkness after dying, and interestingly, again, somebody's experiencing that, like this person who shared that story with me. I saw nothing but darkness, so I know nothing exists. But interestingly, if someone's experiencing darkness, something is existing, namely you, the experiencer. But so you just, I don't want to speculate here, but what I can say is that to experience just darkness after dying. And again, that may eventually lead to something else as well. Who knows? Maybe there's darkness for some time, but it's related to the consciousness, the karma. So what kind of consciousness would allow for a person to just be in total darkness? I don't know. I don't want to speculate about that, but it is a result of something cultivated. And so I could only guess, so I'd rather not. But so many possibilities are there after death because the consciousness is very complex. What we do, what we think, what we feel, the combination of all of it. We're talking about previous lives, this life. And so you get a result just in accordance with all that after you die. So, if you live very good and you're pious and you're in the mode of goodness, and say there's a history of that even in previous lives, then you will have a very pleasant experience after death. It can be very pleasant. And so, but that lasts for some time, and that lasts for some time. And then one has to again come back down to the place of choice, which is the middle planetary systems, where action, choice, the physical body, these things are actually needed for will to get things to actually do something, to make decisions. And so it's kind of like the reset. We all come back here and now again. And the problem is we're born again here, but then because of the association, our materialistic family or friends or the schooling that we have or the upbringing or the culture, we're just again entangled, and we see again, more results after that person dies, and then another culture that they're born into, and that gets in. So we have to take in deeply what we have before us now, which is spiritual culture. spiritual relationships. This is a way out of this whole wheel. All of this is the wheel, heavens and hells and the earth. This is all, we're tied to this wheel again and again until a pure devotee comes into this material world with the desire to serve Krishna and to save others. And they give a message, they give a method, they give the goal. And to the degree we take shelter of all those things, we start to make our path out so that we can leave out through the head and go through all the different realms in the material world, in the subtle realms, and finally we break through into the spiritual realm. And there we are also met by guides, the pure Vaishnavas who are there, and they also welcome a person there. And it's described when Dhruva Maharaj passed away also. He went through these different realms. He actually saw the different subtle areas, higher and higher, heavenly, and then the realm of the rishis, these great yogis, very pure, going, and they're kind of like temptations too, because these are like, if the soul is not very firm in devotion to God as the supreme goal of life, then a person can also get distracted. Oh, that place looks nice. Oh, what's going on there? Wow, that. And then that shows a kind of see desire in the heart. You may have to take a little stop somewhere. No, hopefully not. But sometimes a description like that is given where when you go through these realms, they're kind of like tempting in a certain way. And it checks what's really in your heart. Do you really just want Krishna and service to Krishna, or do you still have your own desires? So anyway.
Thank you so much for such a wonderful and thorough answer. Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. All right. It is late. Man, I'm sorry, guys, but I'm glad to share with you. And thank you for your participation. Hare Krishna.